Good evening. Welcome to Ask Aaron. I'm back in my office, just chilling. It's a spring break week in Hudson, so we don't have youth group tonight, and we are hanging out at home. So anyway, wanted to kick off tonight by reminding everybody that these are my views, not the church's, but they usually agree. And if you have any questions or you disagree, you're still welcome to come and worship with us and ask me any question you want. And actually, this week, people are taking me up on that. We have some questions that are not specifically about the sermon, but they do relate. The sermon this past week was on fear. And as always, you can catch that at hillcityhudson.org/media or on our Facebook or YouTube pages. But I'll start with one that is about fear. And the question is, are there things as Christians that we are allowed to be afraid of or worry about? And I think allowed is kind of the key word in that sentence. You're allowed to feel however you want and to fear whatever you want, but you don't have to. And as we talked about in the message, there's all sorts of good reasons not to. And the main reason is that other than a reverence or a holy fear of God, which just means to show him the respect that he deserves and is due, as Christians, we don't really have anything to fear because the scariest thing that waits for all of us in life is death, and we don't have to fear that because we are on our way to an eternity spent with God and those who love him and those that we love who love him. And so are you allowed to fear things? Sure, you can be afraid of whatever you want, and it's totally understandable why even as followers of Jesus, we fear certain things because they're uncomfortable and they're difficult and they're hard. And I don't want to minimize any of that because I'm empathetic. I struggle with anxiety and I worry about things all the time. Excuse me, but it's sort of this idea that you have to train your mind and you have to learn your Bible to the point where these things that do take over your life and cause you to be afraid don't control you anymore and don't have that power over you. So are you allowed to be afraid of anything? Yes. I mean, you can be afraid of whatever you want. And technically, you're supposed to be afraid of God in the sense that you understand that he's the one who will judge you and he's the one who decides your eternal fate and all those kinds of things. But that's more about showing him respect and being reverent and allowing him to have the proper place in your life. So that's my answer for that. Anyway, next question was, how can I stop worrying about money? This is a big one, right? People worry about all sorts of things. They're afraid they're going to run out of money. They're anxious about it. And I think, one of the Bible verses that people love to quote when it comes to money is, money is the root of all evil. Well, that's not actually what the Bible verse says. The Bible verse says that the love of money is the root of all evil, and that you are not allowed or you can't, as a Christian, serve two masters, right? You'll love one and hate the other. And so the idea is that when we become lovers of money, when we become lovers of stuff and possessions and comfort, we wind up putting money in a place that it was never intended to be for us, which is, it is the thing that makes us happy. It is the thing that makes us comfortable. It is the thing that brings joy and all of those different good, positive emotions into our life. And so when we are worried that we're not going to have any of it, we become afraid. And, all you have to do to see evidence of this is there are tons of non-Christian people who have given up all of their earthly possessions and moved out to Montana or Colorado and live in a tent or in the mountains or, out of their cars even, who are very happy and experience a lot of joy in their life because they're free of that thing that was, causing them angst and anxiety, that they needed a certain amount of money in order to, live the life that they wanted or be successful, whatever. So how do we stop worrying about money? I think the first thing is that we have to readjust our priorities. We have to understand that, even if we had to downsize our house, or we had to drive a different kind of car, or we had to sell some of our stuff, that life would still be good. In fact, we might even find ourselves being happier. Minimalists, tend to be pretty happy. But another way that we can stop our anxiety over finances is to sit down and budget out what it is that we need in a month, or what it is that we need in a year, and why. And by doing the why part of that budget, you can start to adjust. Well, do I really need this in order to be happy? Do I really need this in order to be successful? And as you start to prioritize what it is that you need over what it is that you want or you desire, you'll start to realize that if it really came down to it, usually for those of us who live in the places, like we do, there is an option. There is a way that we can get enough money to survive. The other way is to know and to realize that if you are a part of a body of faith, as Christians, we are called to support one another financially when others are in need. And, our church does that. We give away 10% of everything that comes in, and we reserve a portion of that to give away to members of our church, or people who attend our church. We don't have members, but people who attend our church regularly, because we know that there are people who attend our church who will be in need. And so, there are ways that you can calm your anxieties. The first one, the biggest one, is to realize that God is going to provide for you. And that doesn't necessarily mean financially, but it does mean that there are other ways that you will have food on your table and a roof over your head, be able to provide for your family. And we would love for those of you who are in need to reach out. We actually give all of our money away to other organizations, but we can point you in their direction because we partner with a lot of really great places that do a lot of good work helping those who are in need. So if you ever are truly in need of financial assistance, don't hesitate to ask. But usually when you sit down and do the work of trying to figure out how much and where it goes and all that kind of stuff, it's calming to your heart, because you realize that, if you can live without a few desires or wants, you're usually going to be okay. And if you can learn to not desire so much, you'll be even better. All right. Next question. This one, it's a little tricky. Should we still be following the rules of the Old Testament? Now, how does this tie into fear? Well, open up your Bible and read through the Old Testament, and you will find all sorts of rules that I believe you're probably breaking. One that comes up all the time is that ancient Jewish people were not supposed to eat, and still to this day, Jewish people don't eat pork because it's unclean. They're not supposed to wear mixed fabrics, and just look up what that means, and all of your clothes are probably made of mixed fabrics. The answer as a Christian is sort of, okay? The answer is sort of, and let me explain. In all reality, right, the Old Testament was an old covenant between God and his people, that they were supposed to follow these rules and these laws, and in doing so, prove their obedience and their dedication to the Lord. The new covenant was paid for by Jesus's blood, because the old covenant revealed that we were incapable of living up to it. And so God sent Jesus to pay for our inability to live up to that old covenant, and he made a new covenant with us, where if we confess with our mouths and believe in our hearts that Jesus is Lord, we will be saved. And so the reality is, no, technically you don't have to follow any of those Old Testament laws, and you can be saved. But as we have been talking about before, That's the bare minimum, and no Christian's goal should be the bare minimum. Now, you might notice, right? I have tattoos, I have earrings, and I could go into great depth explaining why I made the choices I did about those things and why I think those laws or rules that you would look up in the Old Testament no longer apply to me and perhaps wouldn't have applied to me anyway. But the main point is there is all sorts of stuff in the Old Testament that is still beneficial to Christians, that is still the way that God would call us to live, even if following Jesus and believing in Jesus and living a Christian life that way is what saves us. I think something, as simple as you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength, right? Well, that still applies to us today. We should still be doing those things. And that is, actually recited by people who wrote in the New Testament because it does still apply. Things like fearing the Lord, which we already talked about, that still applies. We should still have a reverence about God and our relationship with him. The laws about sexual morality still apply. The laws about, how we should treat other human beings, love your neighbor as yourself. That comes from the Old Testament. It's just renewed or restored by Jesus that we should continue to live that way. So there are things in the Old Testament that, yes, we should still adhere to, but not because we have to take the totality of the Old Covenant, but because those are things that still fit with the way that Christ calls us to live. And so I think that the Old Testament is still really applicable to our lives, that we should read it, that we should know what it says, because that is how God called his people to live. And God's character didn't change just because Jesus came, right? He sort of said, I know you're not going to be able to live up to all this, and so I'm going to let you off the hook by giving you this new covenant, which is paid for by the blood of my son. It's not as though, he said, well, those rules were all dumb and I take back ever having said them. That's not what the point of those was, and there were good reasons for some of them. Some of them we no longer have to follow because they no longer apply. And, you could go on a rule by rule basis. There's some 600 laws in the Old Testament that Jewish people, Israelites, Hebrews were supposed to follow. And we could talk about every individual one, and I don't have the time for that. But the answer to the question is yes, I think it still applies in the sense that we should. Do you have to? No. Okay? Last question. And this one is, again, not specifically about the message, but it kind of is. What are some good and bad reasons to leave a church? And, this can be an area that causes people a lot of anxiety. So fear definitely plays a part in this. Good reasons to leave a church. You think the theology is poor. You think that there is bad behavior by a pastor or an elder or someone on staff that directly is involved in a ministry position that is unrepented for, or that person should no longer, they're disqualified for ministry for a biblical reason. If it's not the style that you really prefer, and you know that there are different churches out there that do that kind of style, you don't have to go to a church that sings hymns and does, back and forth between congregation and pastors. And if that's not the kind of style you're going for, there are other types of worship, and it's okay to leave a church over a worship style, but how you leave a church is important, right? You talk to the pastor, you talk to the leadership, you explain why you're leaving, and you leave on good terms. It's important to leave on good terms. Bad reasons for leaving a church, bad reasons for leaving a church. You heard somebody say something bad about someone else, or gossip, right? That's not a good thing, but you should be able to talk to somebody and work that out. Bad reasons to leave a church. my kid didn't get a part in the Christmas pageant that I wanted. Bad reasons to leave a church. They played a song that I don't like. The music was too loud one Sunday. The pastor wears jeans. Anything that's more of a preference that you could talk to someone. Sin issues are reasons to leave churches. Preferences are things that you can talk about. Questions you should be asking of people. And just as a pastor, we always want to know why people leave and don't come back. And you might think, oh, that would be such a horribly awkward conversation. You know what? If you aren't being fed at our church, if you don't feel comfortable at our church, if you don't feel like it is the right community for you, there are 14 other churches in Hudson, where our church is, that are just perhaps a little bit different. And you know what? I don't agree with all of them theologically, stuff like that, but there probably is a better fit for you. And so I want to send you off. I want to help you find that place where you belong. Because what's most important to me is that you're following Jesus and you're being fed, not that you come to our church or you give at our church, anything like that. So that's how I feel about that. You leave church for sin issues that aren't repented for or resolved, but you don't leave over, little petty preferences. All right. Thanks for catching up with me, for asking Aaron. We will see you next week. Have a good one.